Welcome to this week's Wellness Wednesday. And this week we have a interlude in our mini interviews with Kirsty Cullen, Director of Nutrition here at the Optimum Health Clinic. We will have the next in that series next week, and we're then going to continue into the new year. But for this week's episode, I firstly wanted to make an announcement that I'm very excited about. I've just signed a publishing deal for a book on the Optimum Health Clinic approach to recovery from fatigue-related conditions. So that will be ME, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, post-viral fatigue, and also general fatigue as well. And I'm super excited because there's only one publisher that I wanted to work with, which was Hay House, and they are, I think, also super excited about the project. One of the things that's quite frustrating, I think, for authors with books is that I aim to deliver the manuscript next summer, but it won't be till the spring of 2021 that the book will actually be available. But you'll hear more about this, of course, in the time leading up to the publication. And I'm sure I'll be asking for feedback and help and perspectives on certain things in the writing process as well. But the reason why I've called this week's episode Cracking the Code of Fatigue is that isn't the actual title of the book, but it's similar. It's in that kind of area, let's say. And this idea of cracking the code or decoding or kind of really seeing fatigue as a puzzle to be understood is something that is really at the heart of the Optimum Health Clinic approach. It's something that I've talked about in various ways in previous blogs. I think I even mentioned in a previous blog, it's the reason why the Optimum Health Clinic logo is puzzle pieces. Another way of thinking about it is different pieces of a puzzle that we have to fit together. And when we think about cracking the code, or we think about really trying to decipher what is going on, one of the things that I think can sometimes be undervalued or misunderstood is actually the importance of an analytical mind. It is very easy when we're in a deeply challenging and difficult life situation that it almost inevitably it becomes highly emotive, and we get emotionally invested in certain perspectives being right or certain perspectives not being right. I remember early in my journey of, it wasn't even a journey of recovery at that point, it was a journey of illness, but people talking about the role of psychology. And I had had an emotional reaction to that, which was one of deep frustration and feeling misunderstood and judged and all sorts of things. And that meant that I couldn't be open to that. I couldn't understand that. I couldn't kind of explore it because I wasn't actually being analytical. I was being reactive. Or as I talked about in a recent video, I had a confirmation bias, that I had a certain perspective and I was looking for the evidence to defend my perspective and reject other perspectives. And one of the things that I think is really important, both as practitioners, but also for those of you on a healing path, we need to be analytical as much as possible, to not let our emotion and our reactivity and our frustrations or whatever else cloud our judgment of really seeing the evidence and the data as it is. One of the questions that I am often asking myself as a practitioner when I'm trying to understand a case, particularly a complicated case, is what am I not seeing here? In fact, it's even a question that if I'm doing a case review with a colleague, perhaps in the nutrition department, is one of the questions I'll also ask, kind of both of us, is like, what are we missing? What are we not seeing? And that kind of, I think, openness and willingness to seek truth, like to really understand what is going on, not just trying to be right or confirm a perspective, but to really try and seek to understand, like, what am I missing? What are the bits of the jigsaw? What's the bit of the code that I've not quite got clear? In fact, another question that I'm often asking myself as well is what is the kind of grand unifying theory that really makes sense of this collection of symptoms in this way in this patient at this time. That as much as fatigue-related conditions are multi-faceted, that there are different systems being impacted in different ways in different people, there tends to be, there tends to be a kind of explanation that makes sense of those interrelationships. Like an example of this might be that somebody, is presenting with the symptom of fatigue, and you may do tests of mitochondrial function, and you can see that the mitochondria have either got blockages or they're not recycling ATP and ADP effectively. But then you kind of go into it and you go, well, actually, what's going on here is there is a digestive issue. Maybe it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, maybe it's small intestinal fungal overgrowth, maybe it's parasites, whatever it may be. But there's something happening on a digestive level, and that's why the body is not manufacturing energy. It's not getting the raw ingredients that it needs to make energy. So at that point, you might be, oh, well, that explains, or we just have to look at digestion. But then if we take another step further back and we go, well, why is the digestion not working effectively? And we might be, well, that's because there's a history of antibiotics. We might that have affected the gut bacteria. We might look at it and we might go that they've caught some kind of bug which has kind of got in the system and it's kind of proliferated and had an impact. But we might then ask, well, what am I missing? Like, as I was just saying, what am I not seeing here? And we might also go, well, yes, there's the biological, physiological explanation, but there's also been a lot of stress that's going on. There's a kind of like chronic stress pattern that's been happening. And actually, in diving into the case, it becomes clear that the symptoms have got worse under cases of noticeable stress. Often there's stress that we aren't even aware of, we're not even noticing. So then there's kind of, we're looking at the grand unifying theory and we're going, actually, yes, we need to deal, well, to put it slightly differently, we don't just want to jump in and give loads of mitochondrial supplements. So just giving D-ribose and coenzyme A or Q10 or whatever it may be that we want to support mitochondrial function. We go, actually, we need to look at digestion. But we don't just want to look at digestion. We also need to look at the impact of stress because of all the ways that we know the body being in a consistent state of stress directly impacts upon digestive function. That's a whole other video in of itself. So when we're looking for that grand unifying theory, we want to try and explain, and we kind of crack the code. We're trying to explain as many of the pieces of this jigsaw as possible to really be able to make sense and go, well, actually, a very obvious thing, simple thing to do would be just go and give mitochondrial supplements, and that may still be appropriate to support that. But we need to look at the wider picture. We need to look at the different facets of the picture and how they interrelate. And it may well be in a case like that if we just work on psychology alone, it's not enough to support the healing of the gut. Even if we get the body into a healing state, it still needs additional support for the gut healing to take place. But it might be until we calm the system, that gut healing is not effective. Or it may be that until we work on calming some of the digestive system symptoms, it's really hard to get into a healing state. And this is why having an integrative approach that understands, looking for like this grand unifying theory, what's the explanation of all of these different pieces that are happening. And I'm giving a very, I think, oversimplified case here. There's often many more facets to the picture. But it's when we look at it like a code, it's not like we just need to get one number. It may be a code of like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different numbers. And we need to get each number, and we need to get the numbers in the right sequence. I think sequencing is often significantly under-recognized or underappreciated by practitioners. People get very trigger happy to jump in and do the bit that they do. And they don't always realize that the order and the sequence of how we do things can also be really important. I like to think that's one of the things that with the amount of experience we have at the Optimum Health Clinic, we've really got, I think, pretty good at at figuring out what order we should do things, like why we should do this bit, then this bit, then this bit. And then by having done this bit, that's why this next bit is then actually going to be effective. So just to kind of summarize a little bit, we want to see fatigue as a code. We need to decode it or kind of crack that code. We need to have an analytical mind, not be overly emotionally reactive in how we respond to things. We need to have an openness, and we need to be sure we don't have a confirmation bias. We want to be asking questions like, what am I not seeing here? Like, what am I missing? Looking for the bits of the jigsaw that we might not be seeing. And what is the theory that kind of makes sense of everything else? And sometimes it's an odd choice of word, I think, but it's a kind of beautiful thing sometimes. And you really suddenly, you crack the code, like this thing that was mysterious suddenly makes sense. And the human body is brilliant. Like there's a kind of genius to understanding how these different things have interrelated and impacted each other. Now, one of the things that really helps with being able to crack the code, of course, is patience. And as it happens, that's the theme of Thoughtful Thursday tomorrow. I'll be talking about how patience is a muscle and how to develop and cultivate that muscle. So I look forward to talking with you on Thoughtful Thursday tomorrow.